המהלות. אשא עיני אל הגרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מהם אדוני, עושה שמים וארץ. אל יתן למוט רגלך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן, שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני יצילך, עליית ימינך. יומם השמש לא יכך, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור את צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד העולם.
Kol omer kra, va'amar ma'ekra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chatzo, ketzitz hasadeh, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. A voice says, cry out, but I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass, and all of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades, when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar binoteshi yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftacha umishantecha, hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorai, dishantev Hashem en roshi kosi rivaya. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives me for the sake of his glory. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod, they comfort me. You set a table inside of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. I think Elinor stood, about 5 feet tall? But there were times in life when she seemed like she stood 10 feet tall. Marcia and Steve, when she spoke about your accomplishments, when she was so proud of you, she seemed like she was 10 feet tall. Myrna, you said that your sister was so much in love with Larry, you called her mad in love with Larry. And back when they were dating, the fact that he wanted to marry her made her feel 10 feet tall. They were married for 58 years. Becoming a good grandmother, connecting with you, Adam, developing a relationship with you, made her feel 10 feet tall. And whatever her height, this was a strong lady. This was an industrious woman, a creative person. She worked. At times she ran her own business. She was capable in a number of different work settings. And she had enormous energy, enormous wherewithal. I know when you were a little girl, Myrna, she took care of you, being a few years your senior. Later in life, as her parents grew ill, she was the caregiver. She gave her parents the support that they needed. Marcia and Steve, in the home you grew up, she paid many of the bills. She made dinner every night, which you all ate together. She made your lunches. She ran and implemented the schedule of the home. She had energy. She was proud of her home and wanted it to shine. She wanted it to be clean. Elinor knew clean. Marcia, you said your mom lived for clean laundry. And whatever you would do as an adult, no matter at what stage of cleanliness you thought you were in, your mom would show up at your place and get to work. She always had something that she wanted to clean. Her greatest laundry challenge, I understand, was Adam's clothing, but she was ready. She was always ready to take it on. And her energy existed at all hours. Your friends in high school would come over in the middle of the night, and out would come Elinor, and out would come food from the freezer, and your friends would have a full meal. Or she would decide that the house needed new draperies at midnight, and she would make them at midnight. She got things done. I don't know if you've heard, you have these places adults go to here in Cleveland. They put you in a closed room where they give you certain things you need to get out of the room, but then you have to figure out how to create something to get you out of the room. I just feel that Elinor could have always figured out a way to get out of that room. She would have made something. She was very resourceful. She owned and ran her hosiery and sportswear store. She enjoyed the contact with the people, with the customers, but she also knew the business side, and she was very proud of that store. She was a bridal consultant and did the arrangements for a local florist. She did needlepoint. She made purses. In fact, the fact that she made purses that required bows and ribbon led her to being introduced to Larry. That Larry got to know Aunt Ellen first, and then Aunt Ellen got to know Elinor at first, and then introduced them to each other. She was also very proud of working at the Teamsters Credit Union, and she held her own there. She also held her own as she faced off with cancer. In 2 different bouts with cancer, she asserted that I will be fine, and she took it on. She would focus on the pragmatic needs of the moment, and she just decided she was going to triumph. 5 feet tall, it was hard to believe. You two always felt very supported by your mom, and you always knew she was there for you. And again, her energy was never ending. Growing up, if you needed her for anything, she was there. She would try to connect with each of you based on your own interests. She did the same thing in the next generation with her grandson. I understand, Adam, she went to shopping for Pokemon cards with you on more than one occasion. I know she didn't get them for herself. She must have been getting them for you. As you said, Steve, she was often the schlepper. She took you and your friends wherever they needed to go. She and your dad shared a number of interests. They attended Browns games for years together. They cooked together. They worked together on projects in the home. They attended symphony. They had the family trip in the RV, which they both loved. They were both strongly identified and proud of being Jewish. They were culturally very Jewish. And they had very different personalities in some respects, but they always had an ongoing banter between them, sometimes in agreement and sometimes in disagreement. But it was real, and it was honest, and they always loved each other and respected each other. And besides, Larry always knew that if he ever needed $1,000 in cash on the spot, Elinor would have it in her purse or in a drawer in the bedroom or in a closet. Your mother loved to read fiction and nonfiction. Her life was nonfiction. It was real life. Her relationship with your dad was nonfiction. It was not of a novel. It was real life supporting each other. In these last years, of course, there's been vulnerability and there's been frailty and difficulty. It was challenging. I know that you have all, as a family, tried to be there as much as possible and to be supportive and to be helpful. Marcia, I know here in Cleveland, and Steve from afar and visiting when you can. Elinor finally succumbing to her illness, and that's why we're here today. I know that from the time she was young, and Myrna, you said this, and then you folks also said this, that she loved the Indians, right? She loved watching the baseball games. Think about the Indians' most recent season. They were gallant, and in the end, they couldn't triumph over what was inevitable. And in a way, that's what she made a gallant fight for her own health and for her own continuation. And if the inevitable was going to come, she lost no honor through it. She certainly taught all of you a good deal about mental toughness and about resiliency and about sticking to something and carrying on. She may have been 5 feet tall, but she made you, on more than one occasion, feel 10 feet tall. She lived with a good name, and she died with a good name. Stephen?
I apologize in advance if this is a little indulgent, but bear with me. Friday, I finally exhaled. And while I mourn for the loss of my mother, her passing has come as a relief. A relief because in many ways I have been mourning her loss for quite some time. For those of you who might be unaware, my mother was living with a kind of nightmare for the last several years. All of it brought on by the insidiousness of Alzheimer's. It began several years ago when my father was first stricken with dementia. My father was not only a pillar in our community, but in our household too. As a friend of mine said to me just the other day, your dad was like a gyroscope, a stabilizing force. But when your gyroscope stops spinning, you can go into free fall. My sister and I tried to become a stabilizing force, to right the ship as best we could. Marcia here, dealing with the mundane of the day-to-day, and me from a distance, trying to manage the big picture perspective of it all. But without Larry as that rudder to steer the ship, Mom, I think, felt slightly set adrift, tempest-tossed at sea. My mom could do nothing but watch as her husband of over 50 years began to fade away. She never quite came to terms with the inevitability of my father's illness, but nevertheless, she soldiered on with as much dignity as she could muster. I can tell you, it is a heartbreaking thing to see the ones we love be taken from us and yet remain. Let me say that again. Taken from us, yet remain. They slowly and inexorably become decontextualized. Decontextualized first from their memories, then from their friends, and ultimately from their family, until all that is left is a man or woman who appears to be my parent, my friend, but their essence, their spirit has been replaced. Alzheimer's is, in a sense, invasion of the body snatchers writ large. And then, in the past year or so, the same disease that has stricken my father visited itself upon my mother. But her decline was much more rapid, and it had a frightening side effect that tormented her daily. Little bit could be done to alleviate her suffering, and as the anguish she endured was all constructed by a mind that had betrayed her. I say all of this not to dwell upon her downfall or to obsess about the illness itself, but as a way to suggest that the best way to honor Elinor is to remember her fondly from when she was still her essential self, her best self. So rather than spout some endless platitudes about an idealized version of motherhood, I thought it might be more instructive for me to reflect on some memories I have of my mom that might reveal who I thought she was. Illustrative anecdotes, if you will. Things that only I might know. I'm not going to talk about her cooking. I'm not going to talk about her housekeeping or her love of her children or any of the stereotypical duties we think about our mothers. All this I know she possessed, and possessed in abundance. And if you ever ate at our house, surely you would have to agree. But since she was a bit inscrutable, this might be helpful to those of you who knew her in a sphere different from my own. I inherited my love of books and reading from my mother. Mom was a voracious reader. She read everything. In fact, she read the newspaper every day and virtually from cover to cover. I don't think I really knew anyone who consumed more news on a daily basis. And some days when she was finished with the Plain Dealer, she would run me up to Miller Drug at the corner around 5 o'clock. She'd give me some change to get the late edition of the Cleveland Press. And there would be a little left over for a candy bar too, which she gladly indulged. Payment for a job well done, so to speak. She stayed in the car with the engine running so we could make a quick getaway. Partners in crime. It was all legit, but she made a little chore a kind of adventure. But speaking of adventure, I remember a series of books from my childhood called The Great Brain. The stories were about the outsiders, the misfits, the odd ducks, using their smarts to subvert what they perceived as oppression. And when I had consumed all that the local branch of the library had to offer, Mom schlepped me down to the main branch of the Cleveland Public Library, where we continued our quest. First time I ever stepped foot into what, at my age, seemed a daunting institution was with Mom. I remember feeling a bit overwhelmed that day, but not Mom. She was all business. We tracked down every last one of the books in that series, and I read them all with great delight. Thank you, Mom, for planting and then nurturing that seed. But let me be clear, it didn't have to be something from her approved reading list. Any written material would do. Even Mad Magazine. Yep, Mad Magazine. Other kids' moms would confiscate that kind of stuff, but Mom knew what it was and still let me read it, and in plain sight. That's a pretty radical stance. Kind of subversive, in fact. But she was in favor of me consuming it all. Our parents exposed us to everything. Now, some of you may know that in a prior life, I was conferred a Master of Arts degree in film studies. And the reason I think I ever got there was easily attributable to Mom. Going to the movies with Mom was a treat. And the recent passing of Debbie Reynolds struck me like a ton of bricks, to borrow a bit of a hackneyed expression. Now, that may puzzle some of you, but one of my earliest and fondest memories was watching Singin' in the Rain with Elinor. I probably first saw it around the age of 6 or 7, and even at that age, I was taken aback by the supreme skill of the performers and the fantastic musical score. Watching Donald O'Connor do Make 'Em Laugh was like watching a cartoon come to life. And what child could resist seeing Gene Kelly gleefully and artfully splash around in a downpour just as any kid would at that age? And my mom noticed. So whenever she saw that it would be broadcast, she made it a point to watch it together. We watched it on a Sunday night, we watched it as a Saturday matinee, we watched it at Grandma Betty's house too. The three of us bonding over one of the greatest musicals in cinematic history. But watching it with my mom was something special because Mom had the minutia, the background, the dirt, the inside line, the scoop. See, she was always a fan of celebrity and seemed to have an endless supply of both insight and gossip to share. Of course, all of this came in later viewings when I was more of an appropriate age, say 10. You know, her husband Eddie Fisher, a Jew by the way, was stolen away by Liz Taylor, she would say. And then in the same breath, she could pivot to explaining how the scenes with Gene Kelly and the character of Lena were a tribute to Nelson, Eddie, and Jeanette MacDonald. It was a snapshot lesson about cinematic history. But more importantly, it got me started thinking about motion pictures in a deeper and more profound way, even at that age. So we spent many a Saturday folding laundry and watching the Saturday matinee, an Elvis Presley feature or two, or Some Like It Hot with Tony Curtis, or a Western with Kirk Douglas. Speaking of which, one of Mom's favorite things to do was watch a movie and play Who's the Jew? Lauren Bacall, Jewish. Kirk Douglas, Jewish. Tony Curtis, Jewish. Tony Randall, also Jewish. Marilyn Monroe, converted, but still Jewish. So long before Adam Sandler ever wrote the Hanukkah song, my mom invented Who's the Jew? Now, I know that's not true. We all, as a matter of pride, claim other members of the tribe as our own. But my mom pulled back the curtain on that bit of artifice, which got me pulling back the curtain on lots of other bits of artifice in our culture. Again, somewhat subversive, my mother. But the movies were always about having fun. But she'd slyly sneak in an object lesson. It was 1978, and she took me to see Animal House. I was 13, and it was R-rated. I will never forget, just before the movie started, I got a tap on my shoulder from someone sitting 2 rows behind me. It was my friend from school, Kenny Schneider. And Kenny said, "Hey man, be careful, you're going to get thrown out of here." See, like a lot of kids back then, Kenny had snuck in with his older brother. And Kenny was warning me about the man. Given that Mom was all of 5 feet tall, as we've clearly established, in a strong wind, he probably thought I had snuck in too. But I said to Kenny, "This is my mom." And when my mom turned around, Kenny turned beet red. I think he thought he was in trouble, but he quickly realized, oh, she's cool. Yes, Mom was cool, period. But she also wisely knew that I would probably seek it out on my own. So why not see it with her? To see it without shame. And that is exactly what she did. And without uttering a single word, she trusted that I was mature enough to handle the adult subject matter. Yet again, Elinor was subversive. So I hope these few stories were helpful and maybe gave you some insight into who my mother was, not how you knew her, but how I did. She was a positive influence in my life just by being herself and showing up. And isn't that the life lesson in a nutshell? Just be sincere and show up. So I would like to leave you with one last thought. It is not my own, but rather that of the French novelist and essayist Marcel Proust. It has helped me grieve and come to terms with the loss. I hope sharing it with you today brings you comfort as it did me. Now, there is one thing I can tell you. You will enjoy certain pleasures you would not fathom now. When you still had your mother, you often thought of the days when you would have her no longer. Now you will often think of days past when you had her. When you are used to this horrible thing, that they will be forever cast into the past, then you will gently feel her revive, returning to take her place, her entire place, beside you. At the present time, this is not yet possible. Let yourself be inert. Wait till the incomprehensible power that has broken you restores you a little. I say a little, for henceforth you will always keep something broken about you. Tell yourself this, too. For it is a kind of pleasure to know that you will never love less, that you will never be consoled, but that you will constantly remember more and more. Mom, I hope I did right by you. You always did right by me. I hope I didn't give away too many of your secrets today. Sorry I never did finish that dissertation so you could have a doctor, albeit a doctor of letters in the family, but I hope you were proud nonetheless. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for coming today and sharing your remembrances, your thoughts, and your condolences. But I take comfort in knowing Mom is assuredly in a better place now. Thank you.
Let's rise now for the memorial prayer.
There you go. Hey, Malay Rachamim, Shochain Bameromim, Hametzemen Chanechon, Tachat Kanafei Ashkin, Bemahalot Kedoshim Odhorim, Kazogar Garakia Mazgerim, Et Nishmahat, Chaya Esther Bat Alta Vebatya, Shagalacha Leholama, בגדנתכם מנוחתה, אנא ברחמים, אסתירך בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen.
May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life. May she rest in peace. And we all say Amen. Let's be seated. We want to offer our condolences to Larry, to Marcia, to Stephen, to Adam, to Myrna and David, and the entire family. We're going to move now to the burial spot to complete the service. Following the burial, family will receive friends for the Shiva visitation at the Wymor residence, 3162 Lander Road in Pepper Pike. 3162 Lander Road in Pepper Pike. Today, following the full service and continuing until 9 p.m. tonight. Tomorrow, Monday, from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Please remain in your seats for another moment or two. We're going to arrange the processional to take us to the burial ground. The pallbearers should now come forward.